I'm Andy McNeil, and Misty Hale is here with me today. We're here for another edition of Y'all Hear About This. And so it's our new name for what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is just notice certain things that are happening nationally. Some are a little more fun than others, and just sort of talk about them. But I hear there's exciting things going on in Hector, though. Misty, maybe we should start there.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about football later too, but yeah, we got to start by saying the Hector Wildcats are 5-0, and Lucas Baker, their running back, is the number 2 running back in the state of Arkansas. He's over 1,000 yards in 5 games, which is
that's a heck of a lot of yards.
It's amazing.
So do they have a tough opponent tonight?
So we play Mountainburg, and I really don't know. I don't know if they're good or not. I do know their mascot is the Dragons, which I think is a really cool mascot name.
That is pretty cool. Some are always better than others, you know. Yeah. So well, I hope they win. I hope they win, and I hope he crushes it on the yards.
And I like you look like you're all teched out, ready for some tech football.
I'm all green for Arkansas Tech. Well, and I've got an Arkansas United hat. Or Ozark United, rather, but the potential pro team up in Bentonville. Do you want to start? Or you want me to start on what I noticed?
You start. I want to hear what you have.
Okay, here's what I noticed, and it's actually bear with me as I sort of unpack this. So one of the things that I noticed was the test scores on math and science have continued to fall over the last decade for high school students, but not even just for high school students. Just
are we talking about in Arkansas or nationwide?
Nationwide.
Nationwide.
And I'm going to talk about it from a state perspective here, because this is probably decent news for Arkansas in this perspective.
Okay.
But these scores have continued to fall. And when you listen to the people that will unpack them, they'll say something like that the top performers have just sort of remained status quo, but you've had continue to fall out of the bottom quartile. So it's gotten worse. And the reason that I've been thinking about this is especially in the light of the compact that Donald Trump put out. Mm-hmm. And so this week there was an op-ed piece by Mark Rowan, who runs Apollo, which is a big fund that's let's just call it a big private equity fund. Apparently he was part of the team that put that compact together, and he wrote this article about, just talking about it in a positive way. And then there was another article written by David Brooks of the New York Times that was also about education. And so I wanted just to say what I noticed about all of these things, and I'm going to amalgamate it all together. Okay. And so here's what I think in summary, what I would say is that from the time of the printing press, of course, reading started to increase. And you might say that the 18th century was this point where people really started to read a lot. And I would say that habit of reading and consuming mm-hmm. knowledge in a way that somebody has to lay it out on a piece of paper to create their arguments really gave rise to reason and hostility to superstition, like witch hunts, and the birth of capitalism and the increase in science and maybe the birth of human rights. And so when we look at statistics like we're not scoring as well, coupled with the huge fall off of people that are reading for fun. So U.S. reading for pleasure has fallen 40% in the last 20 years. So what used to be huge numbers selling books is now much, much smaller. And so here is my reason why I think this is, and I'm not the only one that thinks this. In fact, I'm borrowing a lot of other people's ideas, and maybe to layer in some politics. So I think that one of the things that happen is that is the rise of sitting and looking at a screen. So, for the last decade, everybody is more and more addicted to a screen, including myself, mm-hmm. right? Looking at various things. And we're subjected to short videos, the algorithms that control those videos. And so I think that there is risk here. And I think that the risk is that on one hand, when we teach great novels, the reason that they're great in some ways is because they're the best of what's been thought and said, and and they the good novels then link to other good novels in a lot of different ways. And so when we replace that with short videos, then we have this way that we can maybe not learn things, or maybe the truth escapes us because people create things that are emotional, angry, chaotic. Maybe they're shouting, weeping, etc. And so I worry in a society where we're based on science and technology, where people don't know a lot about that. And if I were to link in, this is my last thought. I know I'm being a little long-winded here, but one of the things I think it's interesting in the U.S., I don't know if you remember No Child Left Behind, but when that was passed, it was overwhelmingly passed. Like almost no people voted against it. Like I think in the Senate, it was less than 10 people that voted against it. And which sounds like amazing if you did that today. Then we abandoned, and that was a program about accountability. And so one of the things they did is we replaced this in 2015. I think it was 2015 with, I think the act was called Every Student Succeeds Act. And what it really, and really what sort of happened in politics is that the left didn't really like accountability. So they wanted to water down accountability because accountability highlights people who aren't performing. Right. And that sometimes is political, they want to not, it's uncomfortable at times. And, and the right didn't really like this either. And so, they wanted to have more choices. And, so accountability was out and equality was in, and so I think that, and that's about 10 years ago, right? And you watch this fall off. And so, what I wonder about is that, that we need to get back to the basics, of reading and writing and math. And we need to hold people accountable to that. And that's good for all of us, because I think we'd rather live in a world where we're rationally reasoning out things that are good for us versus things that are characterized by maybe shallowness and simplicity. And so anyway, that's what I noticed. Sorry for the long-windedness.
No, I
don't
like
know if you
that.
have any counter reaction to that or just supportive reaction to it. And I know I lumped a lot of things in,
Well, I'm a book reader, so I think it is important to read. I think everybody should read. I do audiobooks sometimes more frequently. Of course, Spotify has its new audiobook feature, which I love. But I do find that when I'm listening to it, I don't engage with it as much, because when I'm reading a book, like I'll pause to digest, at certain spots. I'll be like, ooh, I need to think about that for a little while. But, when it's an audiobook, I don't do that. It just keeps going and I'm not pondering it. It's just feeding me instead of me more critically experiencing it. So
I've had that happen where I'm listening to an audiobook and I get slightly distracted and the audiobook keeps going and then I sort of don't know what it said. I will say that that I also think that if you have to lay out your arguments for something, and let me be political for a second. So let's just take something that's also, you talk about, let's send troops to some place that is determined chaotic. And my guess is if this was not in little sound bites and we had to actually lay out the problem in depth, even let's say with maps and all sorts of other stuff, I wonder if we would all form different opinions. We're not going to take the time to do that, but if we did, I wonder if you'd have to put forth a valid argument. Let me give you an example of just political this. So I really like books, and I'm actually I like to collect books. So one of the books that I went back and got is a book on the Lincoln debates, the Lincoln Douglas debates. So those debates at the time were considered short, but each one of them spoke for like an hour to an hour and a half, where the other person then spoke for an hour, and so they all were filled with like depth of reasoning, logic, data. And so you just can't even imagine that in today's world, right? Look no further than this week where the Speaker of the House and Mark Kelly, who are both getting separately interviewed, I think, out in the rotunda, like got in like what I perceive as a little bit of a screaming match. And I just think, oh my God, so like so anyway.
I think you have such a great point, and I love it. And I love the rise of book talk. Have you heard about that on TikTok? Book talk?
No.
Yeah. So supposedly book talk is like leading to increased sales in all the books that are featured in there. So that's driving a lot of younger people to get more into reading. Because I do think like video games and Instagram and, like you said, all of these like quick hit engagements are kind of keeping our younger generations from reading the way that our generation grew up reading for entertainment. So
yeah,
I think that's really important to get them back to that. Also, last thing I'll say about this is phonics. There was a time where we drifted away from teaching children phonics as a way to learn to read. You can see that in Mississippi when they started teaching phonics again. Mississippi's literacy rates for elementary students just started skyrocketing. And that's what Sarah Huckabee Sanders through the Learns Act really invested back into. No, we're going to teach phonics and we're going to make reading and literacy the key part of a child's education in their early years.
One of the articles that I was reading actually, looking at the statistics, actually pointed out Mississippi, and they were making the point something along the lines of like, not they mentioned phonics, but also in terms of the accountability said something like, there, if you fail the third grade, you take it again. We just don't keep pushing the problem forward because as we push it forward, the costs and the implications rise, for all of us. Mm-hmm. And so, so I think we have a lot at stake. I'd hate to think we live in a world where, we're not really paying attention to things. You might say that in a feudal world where we have kings and queens and we have, the nobility, and we have basically an uneducated citizenry where there's not the free flow of ideas. It wasn't in the people that ran everything. It wasn't in their interest for everybody else to be smart, right?
No.
And as because the rise of all of this also meant the demise of them. And so I don't think we want to go back to a stage where there's like a few people at the top that are deciding everything and the rest of us are just, sheep. Yeah. So tell me what you thought was interesting.
So mine is less highbrow. I want to talk about the NFL and how it is abandoning its core demographic. Okay. So this is what I noticed. If you think of just think in your head of who you think is the key NFL demographic, who's going to the games, waving their little, what are those yellow towels called? Terrible towels.
Terrible, especially if you're a Steeler fan.
So the average NFL viewer is 55 years old. 60% of NFL fans are non-Hispanic white. And so that's from a Morning Consult analysis. Okay, so only 17% of NFL fans are under 35 years old. Okay, so majority white, majority older gentlemen. And yet, you've probably heard that the NFL selected Bad Bunny, the Puerto Rican rapper, as the NFL halftime show for the Super Bowl this year. Which, if you look at his stats, so it's a huge mismatch because I think it's over half of Bad Bunny's U.S. listeners are between 13 and 27.
Yeah. So you're saying it may be no bueno.
I'm saying like when my uncle or my dad goes to watch the NFL halftime show, they're not going to understand a word that is said, nor are they going to understand the music, really. Yeah,
one of the things for sure, because I'm older than 55, I definitely don't really know anything about Bad Bunny's music. I've heard of him because occasionally I look at statistics about who's selling. This guy streams songs in the billions. So somebody's listening to these guys. Given the fact that these countries in Central America and South America are in our time zone, if I were the NFL and in a global market, I'm competing against soccer for sure. How do I really expand my brand and make more money? I don't know what the songs would be if you put like what I wanted, but my guess is even you wouldn't want to listen to it if they were picking what I wanted to listen at halftime.
That's true. You're never going to please everybody.
Yeah, there's no way. Because if I got to pick the halftime show, I would pick, because I'm sort of stuck in I'm stuck in like music world of the 80s. I would be picking an 80s act, so which means they're probably in their 60s or 70s up there, and so anyway, anyway, so that's what that may be the counter.
It's a very good counterpoint. I mean, you always want to expand your market, and the Latino market is that population is growing in the U.S. So it's definitely a growing market if they can tap into it.
Yeah. So how do you think this ends? Do you think they make a change, or do they stick with that?
No, I don't think they make a change. I think they're too far in. And the NFL, I feel like they have been becoming more and more politically overt over the past probably 6 to 8 years. And we can go into the reasons for that, but we won't do that on this podcast. Yeah. But a lot of their decisions no longer fit their key demographic. And I think that's really alienating because, if I'm watching football, I have football on because it's escapism. It is in place of politics. It is in place of the real world. I just want to watch people hit one another. The Super Bowl, I want a good show, and I just want to kind of zone out for a little while. Turning Point USA has said that they're going to host an all-American, faith and family alternative halftime show. So it'll be interesting to see the dueling numbers for those two things.
It's funny. I have this reaction to that where, I guess I'm just a little cynical, but where I look at it and say, okay, they use it to then say, ooh, this is an opportunity for us to come into play. However, I'll add this too. One of the things I do think that is interesting, that maybe we're headed this way, where, especially in football, where if I don't want to listen to the commentators that are there, I could actually listen to other commentators. And so, I know for college sports, I like to listen to the commentators that are commentating for my team, as opposed to the ones that are neutral. I want to listen to the guys that are on our side, because I think they're just more into it, right? And they're more emotional about it, and so, you could envision a world where the football, there's 10 different halftimes. Pick your halftime.
That's true. I actually love that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, you could just say, you know what? There's one here in the field. There's one over here. There's one over there. Click your TV to whichever one you want to watch, and we'll have 5 halftimes.
That would be really smart. If they had maybe 10 different ones in different stadiums across the country, you buy the ticket to the one that you want to go to. Maybe they even have the game playing on the big screen, and then you get your concert. It's videotaped. You select the one that you want when it's time, and then I like that.
NFL needs to hire us. That's all there is to it. All right. That's it for y'all hear about this. Misty, have a great weekend. I hope Hector wins.
You too, Eddie. Thanks. Bye.
See ya.